How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hip Drop Podcast. This is the second episode of our second season of this podcast, the Saturday, July 25th edition. My name is Owen Smith, and we are here to discuss some bold predictions for the NFL this season. Training camp is really opening. The Panthers and the Cardinals reported earlier this week because they're playing in the Hall of Fame game. The Seahawks and the Patriots, I believe, reported yesterday because they're playing on opening night. And I believe the Rams and the 49ers report today because they will be playing in the second game of the season. I think everybody else gets there on Tuesday. Chiefs, quarterbacks, and rookies are in. The rest of the players will be in on the 28th, first practice on the 29th. So football season is officially here. We got the preseason coming up. And of course, we have the NFL season kicking off in a little less than 2 months on September 8th in Seattle. So Lucas and I will give our predictions. What we're going to do today is we're going to discuss 5 bold predictions we each have for the 2026 season. And then we will give 3 teams that made the playoffs per conference last year that we think will miss it this year. I will be covering the AFC and Lucas will be covering the NFC. So Lucas, how you doing this morning on this fine Saturday?
I am doing very well. It's the dead of summer, or dead of summer for the summer, not for the NFL season. But yeah, doing pretty well. Can't complain. Can't wait for the NFL season to officially get underway, which I don't really consider training camp the start of the NFL season. I
Yeah,
consider it.
I agree.
I get to the Hall of Fame game, which shout out. I'm gonna go a little bit off on a tangent here, but it's relevant to the Hall of Fame game. I just want to give a shout out to the Minnesota Vixen of the I think it's the Women's Professional Football League, but it's the women's version of the NFL. They are actually playing in their championship game today in Canton, Ohio, in the Hall of Fame game stadium.
Oh,
And
nice.
my cousin's boss is the star wide receiver for the team. So shout out to Solveig Lundberg and the Minnesota Vixen as they go for a Minnesota Sports Championship because the women's teams can behave themselves to winning titles, but the men's teams, like the
Men's team's
Vikings
not so
and the
much.
Twins, shit the bed. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
go out of a tangent. Shout out to the Vixen and go win that title.
Yeah, I saw an old Vikings fan on Twitter account in his Twitter bio was just one before I die. And like, oh boy, we'll see what happens this year. We actually have some takes about the Vikings coming up in this podcast. So not to spoil anything there, but yeah, I agree. Um Look, I'm not one of those people who has real takes from the preseason. I think we've come to kind of realize it's more so just to get a look, just to get a feel, just to get some game action. But it's not really intuitive of how the season goes. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Kenny Pickett looked like Joe Montana in the preseason just 3 years ago, and we all saw how that worked out. Speaking of Kenny Pickett, might be starting the Hall of Fame game because he's the backup in Carolina. So shout out Kenny Pickett there. But yeah, it's definitely here that like the doldrums of the NFL season, I think, is that period between mandatory minicamp ending and then the start of training camp because really nothing happens. So we're really finally putting that to bed. But enough, not to bury the lead here, but we are going to get into our bold predictions. We'll each give one at a time. Lucas, we actually have the same because not to spoil anything, but we did trade notes beforehand. We actually have the same top bold prediction. Um, and that is, and Lucas, if you want to feed off of me, so my first bold prediction is that the Cincinnati Bengals, will get the number 1 seed in the AFC, and that is notable because the Bengals have not made the playoffs since losing to the Chiefs in the 2022 AFC Championship game. Joe Burrow's missed significant time with injury 2 of the last 3 years. The one year he was healthy, their defense was absolutely abysmal. So they cost them the playoffs that year. But I think the Bengals return to the playoffs this season. And not only do they return to the playoffs, I think they get the number 1 seed because their schedule is not difficult at all. And when you look at the Bengals, the biggest question with them, besides Burrow staying healthy, is their defense because their defense has been one of, if not the worst unit in the league over the last 2 years. But they made legitimate effort to add to that side of the ball. They trade for Dexter Lawrence. They sign Boye Mafe. They signed old friend Brian Cook in free agency. And here are the quarterbacks the Bengals play this season. and this is the case for their defense to be good. The quarterbacks the Bengals play this year are Baker Mayfield, CJ Stroud, Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence, Malik Willis, Lamar Jackson, Cam Ward, Michael Penix, Aaron Rodgers again, Jaden Daniels, Tyler Shuck, either Deshaun Watson or Shador Sanders, Mahomes, Bryce Young, Daniel Jones, Lamar again, and then the Browns again. So outside of, look, you have Lamar twice and Mahomes, maybe Daniels if he's healthy, and like arguably Lawrence. They don't play a single other above average starting quarterback the rest of the way. So that should be a recipe for success for the Bengals defense. And I do think if Burrow's healthy, like I said, that schedule, it starts off kind of difficult because their first 4 games, Bucks at home, Texans and Steelers on the road, Jaguars at home. That's not super easy, but it really lightens up after that. I think they will win 13 games in the regular season this year, and I think they will get the top seed in the AFC. I'm not going to say where their playoff finish is because we're going to save that for our official predictions in August. But my first one is the Bengals being the number 1 seed in the AFC. Lucas, I know yours was the same, so add anything you want to that I bypassed in my assessment.
No, I echo a lot of the same parts. For context, we had the same one, but I added a little bit more details. I have Joe Burrow winning the MVP and the Bengals hosting the AFC Championship because the latter one is more given if you're the one, so you're likely going to host the conference championship. But
Yeah, and you just need to win one game.
Yeah, and I have Burrow winning the MVP mainly just because if you're going to be the number 1 seed, that really is an inside track to get in the MVP. I mean, that trend has gone away the past couple of years. Where I think before 2024 and Josh Allen's MVP, the previous 12 MVP winners all had a first round bye in some capacity. So usually when I go to predicting my MVP is which teams are going to win the most games. Like that's an MVP is not going to finish 6-11. So that's kind of my prediction there. But you echoed a lot of it. Like the schedule's not hard. I mean, other than the first 4 games of the year, it's like, and then they have a bye week in week 6. It's like if they can get out of the first 4 weeks 2-2, I think they're fine. And
Right.
I don't. There's no chance they miss the playoffs. But the first 4 games are all losable, but they're also not threatening. Like they could lose to the Bucks, Texans, Steelers, and Jaguars. I just don't think they're going to lose to all 4. And I have them going 2-2 because what I did this, I just went through every game again now that it's 2 months post schedule release, and I said, okay, what sticks out? And the Bengals were my number 1 seed. It's not necessarily because I believe they're the most well-rounded roster, but in the NFL, it's the schedule matters most. I'm not really threatened by a lot of opponents on their schedule. I think it's 5 games the entire year where oh shit, they're playing a quarterback who could potentially match Burrow if he plays well. That's
5
Lawrence,
of them.
Mahomes, Jackson. Yeah, 5.
Yeah, Lawrence, Mahomes, Jackson. Yeah, Jackson twice and Daniels. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily because I believe the Bengals are some well-coached team and uber talented roster, but I think the offense is going to be as good as ever. I think they added a lot of good enough players to where it has to be better at some point. The defense has to be the 20th best. So I think that'll be enough. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I think they're as good as the Rams or there's some infallible team that will automatically make the playoffs. But I think I have them at 12-5, and I think 12-5 might be good enough for the 1 seed this year because I have questions about every team, but I have Cincinnati finishing on top of the conference in the regular season.
Yeah. So yeah, we shared that one. Actually, I see a lot of people predicting the Bengals to do well this year because I feel like certain regressions got to come to the mean. Like Joe Burrow missing the playoffs 4 years in a row would be pretty unfathomable. So, and like I said, their schedule is probably the easiest it's been since he's been there. All right, my next bold prediction is that one of the final 4 teams in the league last year, so one of the Patriots, Broncos, Seahawks, and Rams missed the playoffs. And this is a bit of a spoiler for our next segment because it's going, AFC teams, playoff teams last year that missed the playoffs the following year. And that team for me is the Broncos. I have the Broncos missing the playoffs in 2026. Because when you look at the Broncos last year, they went 14-3. They were the number 1 seed. They host the AFC Championship game. Maybe, actually, I would argue, probably go to the Super Bowl if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt. But they were similar to the Patriots in the sense they played a joke of a schedule. And the difference between the Broncos and the Patriots in the regular season is the Patriots, more often than not, handily beat the bad teams on their schedule. They would win in blowout fashion, whereas the Broncos were squeaking by teams like the Raiders and the Titans and the Jets and the Chiefs in Week 17 on Christmas with Chris Oladokin at quarterback. Like the Broncos did not have many, if any, wins last year where they won comfortably. I think their only blowout win was against Cincinnati in Week 4 with Jake Browning at quarterback, that Monday night game. More often than not, the Broncos kind of won games by the skin of their teeth, and I think regression is gonna kind of turn it around. Kind of come to them negatively this year. I still am not a huge believer in Bo Nix. Like I think he's a average starting quarterback. I think their defense is good, but defense is kind of weird because they're not as consistent on a year-to-year basis. I think there's a world where that defense goes from a top 5 unit, which they were last year, to like a borderline top 10 unit. Um, like I like that they added Jalen Waddle. I don't think they're going to be a bad team, but I don't think they make the playoffs. I think they fall just short. I think they win 9 games and fall just short because their schedule, unlike the Bengals, their first 6 games are as hard as you can get. You're at the Chiefs on a Monday night to open the year. You host Jacksonville in Week 2. You host the Rams, who we agree are the best team in the league, in Week 3 on a Sunday night game. You're at San Francisco in Week 4. You're at the Chargers in Week 5, and then of course you host the Seahawks in Week 6 in a Thursday night game. You'll also have other games. You have the Chiefs just 2 weeks after that. You have a game against the Panthers, which I don't think the Panthers are that good, but you're traveling cross country to play a team that won a division last year. You play the Steelers on the road. Like you play the Bills at home. Like their schedule, the Patriots on the road, their schedule is significantly more difficult than it was last year, especially if those teams are at least close to the level they were a year ago. So yeah, I do not have the Broncos in my final 7 for the AFC after being the 1 seed last year.
Yeah, I hear you all the way. I have Denver in the playoffs, but like your point's valid. Like for me, I have them as the 7 seed at 10-7. So it's not like we
Right.
view them that differently. It's just maybe the other teams in the conference we view those teams differently. But like as you said, their schedule is like holy crap. Like if you look at their schedule, we talked about this in May. Each of their first 6 games are losable. Like they're
Right.
obviously not going to start 0-6, but like any one of those 6 games, if you were to predict Denver to lose before the season, you'd be like, okay, that's valid. Maybe not. They might not start 1-5, but like, could they start 2-4? Like, I think that's perfectly on. I think 2-4 is perfectly on the table.
It's
And
not
then,
unreasonable.
yeah, and then the schedule does lighten up between weeks 7 and 16. But when they host Buffalo, they play maybe 1 or 2 games where you're like, okay, they're in trouble. At home against Kansas City, at Pittsburgh. So I think if they could survive those first 6 games, go 3-3. I think as a Denver fan, you're doing backflips because I think if they could go 3-3 through the first 6 weeks, they'll make the playoffs. But they start 2-4, man, they're probably gonna have to start looking at a wild card spot. But yeah, I hear you all the way. I have them at 10-7. I don't think they're gonna win 14 games again. They might be a more well-rounded team, but I just don't think they're gonna win as many games as last year, and that might unfortunately force them to have a lower playoff seed or miss the playoffs altogether.
All righty. All right, Lucas, what is your number 2 bold prediction?
It's similar to number 1, and we joke
Okay.
around because we say this team is the Bengals of the NFC, and it's in the exact not to the same extent, but I have the Cowboys winning the NFC East, getting the number 2 seed in the NFC, and then playing in the NFC Championship. Not going to say if they're going to win it, lose it, host it, go on the road, but I think the Cowboys. I think it's kind of similar to Cincinnati. I just don't view their schedule as that daunting. I'm not overly impressed with the roster, but I'm also not like overly threatened with a lot of their games. I think they're going to get into the playoffs. Like I think the Cowboys are going to be at least 10-7, maybe get the 7 seed, but I think maybe they're going to be one of those teams that just gets a couple of bounces that gets them to 12-5, even though they might be more like a 10-7, 11-6 caliber team. And I think a lot of it goes down to I think Dak Prescott's surely a top 10 quarterback. George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb might be the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. If not, it's like the 3rd best, worst case scenario. I think Javonte Williams is more than sufficient. I think there's a strong chance their offensive line comes together with the Tylers and all the other talent they have there to be maybe not elite, but good enough. And their defense, they brought in a lot of pieces this year. Like everyone loves Caleb Downs. They brought in Rashawn Gary. It's a full season of Kenny Clark, so it seems like they're just building the Green Bay Packers of the South.
Right.
And they have a couple passers that I like. They Malachi Lawrence, who I don't think is like I didn't like love the pick where they got him, but I think every draft analyst agree he's a super talented raw edge rusher. And they also have a second year pass rusher, Donovan Ezeraku. So I think the best case scenario, if everything goes right, this Cowboys team is really good. And not to mention my guy, they have Shavon Ravel, who I'm still holding out hope for to be an elite corner. So I'm kind of taking a leap of faith. But I think if they have a raw enough talented roster to where, okay, they could win 12 games this year, but maybe enough goes wrong that maybe they don't make the playoffs. But Brian Schottenheimer showed last year that he can coach. He's not some goofball who got hired because he could be a Jerry Jones puppet. He's a real coach. And I think they got enough talent to where I could see them winning the division, especially because all the other teams in the division have serious questions, even if the floor of this division as a whole is pretty high.
Yeah, just so to echo your thoughts on their schedule. So their schedule, they're at the Giants week 1, Sunday night game, Commanders at home, Ravens, that's a tough game in Brazil. At Houston, tough game. Buccaneers at home, at Green Bay, at Philly, Cardinals, at Colts, Niners, Titans, Eagles, at Seattle, at Rams, Jacksonville, Giants, at Washington. So, like, there are a few tough games in there, like at Philadelphia, at Green Bay in a 2-game stretch, the Niners at home, obviously at the Rams, at Seattle. But like there are a lot of winnable games in there, for sure. Look, I actually in
Yeah, and I will
our last
clarify,
episode.
and just to step in, when I said their schedule is kind of favorable, I mean it in the sense that they have a lot of their tougher games are off mini bye weeks or bye weeks. Like if you
Oh
look
yeah.
at it, like yeah, they played the Ravens, who's going to be tough, but that's in Brazil, and they're technically the home team, so it's not. It could be at Jerry World. But then when they play the Packers at Lambeau in the Micah Parsons revenge game, that's off a mini bye. And then in addition, when they go to Seattle, that's a Monday night game after they play on Thanksgiving the week prior. And then after the bye week, they will go. That's when they play the Rams. So a lot of their toughest games in conference, they're coming off extended breaks. So like in the NFL, rest matters a lot. So I think the structure of their schedule matters a lot, maybe more so than the opponents, like it does Cincinnati.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Whereas the Bengals, I think the teams are easier, but the Cowboys get a lot of favorable, matchups at certain times. Like in our last episode, and when I predicted 3 NFC teams that missed the playoffs last year that I think could get in this year, I had the Cowboys as one of those teams because I think that division's winnable. I don't believe in the Commanders at all. The Giants, I liked as a worst to first team, and then I saw that John Harbaugh speech and I'm like, I'm good. The Eagles are kind of an ultimate wild card, in my opinion. We don't really know what to get. So, look, I'm not going to go overboard and say like they're going to go to the Super Bowl or something, but I can see a world where their defense is at least average and the offense, plays to the level it did a year ago, or at least close to the level
Oh,
a year.
I do have some mini breaking news.
What?
Adam Schefter just tweeted this is that Kyle Shanahan was in a car accident a few days ago, and it will leave him limited as training camp begins.
Oh,
So
wow.
doesn't sound like he's going to miss. It doesn't sound like it wasn't life threatening, but he did say he broke his nose, 3 ribs, his hand, and needed 40 stitches in his face, and got a severe concussion on a July 14th crash when he collided with an SUV near his home. So thoughts go out
Oh,
to Kyle
gosh.
Shanahan there. Doesn't sound like he's going to miss any time, but it just seems like San Francisco they can't stay healthy. Not to make a joke of it, but like sounds like he is okay, but that is significant news that
Yes.
just broke about 5 minutes ago.
Wow. It's July 14th. Jeez. Unreal. So it's Chris Forrester, their assistant head coach and offensive line coach, will be the head coach um, at this time. So it looks like Kyle Shanahan will be ready for week 1 when they play the Rams in Australia. But wow, that's wild. So prayers out to the Shanahan family. Good that he seems like he's all right. But wow, that's pretty crazy. Um, so yeah, that's quite breaking news there. So yeah, Chris Forrester will step in as their interim head coach. But it's good that Kyle Shanahan appears to be, not seriously injured or
Yeah,
in that incident. So
yeah, 40 stitches in his head. That's
Not like life
it was
threateningly.
serious, but like it wasn't life threatening because like
That's what I meant to say.
man,
Yeah.
that's like 40 stitches is a lot. I remember I got hit in the head a couple years ago, and maybe that's why I'm really bad at picking games. And I needed like 6 stitches in my forehead, and I thought that wasn't fun. He needed 40 in his face. Like best of luck. My thoughts are with him and his family, but it does sound like he's gonna be fine in the long run. But how long it takes for him to get back on the sideline is um still remains to be seen. But that's unfortunate for Mr. Shanahan, and I wish him the best of luck.
For sure. Absolutely. 100%. Um, yeah, that's wild. All right. So back to what I was saying. Yeah, I would not be surprised if the Cowboys make the playoffs. I don't know if I'd go as far to say that they go to the NFC Championship game, because they have not been there literally in 30 years. So, but I do see a world where they win that division and are a good team in 2026. All right. So my next bold prediction, and this is probably going to age horribly by week 2. My prediction is that the Jets are playing meaningful games in December. I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team. As a matter of fact, not to spoil anything, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. However, I do not think they're mathematically eliminated. I think mid-December, they're still mathematically alive for the postseason, and they're playing meaningful games. Because the Jets, I think they had a really good draft. They had 3 first-round picks in David Bailey, Kenyon Sadiq, and Omar Cooper Jr. They upgraded it. Look, Geno Smith isn't anything special, obviously, but they upgraded from Justin Fields to Geno Smith. They have a pretty good offensive line. They have good, a legitimate number 1 receiver in Garrett Wilson. They have a star running back in Breece Hall. Their defense, they added pieces there like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Demario Davis. Obviously Bailey in the second round. I feel like they kind of overturned that roster and got rid of all the guys, not all, but like most of the guys from the previous like Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas era, and kind of bringing in new guys. They're bringing in some good veteran leadership. Like I don't think the Jets are going to be particularly good this year, but I think there's a world where they win anywhere from like 5 to 7 games, and they won 3 last year, so that'd be an improvement. And they're playing, like I said, they're playing meaningful games in week 15, 16.
No, I hear you. Like when I went through the games, I had them at 3 and 14. But I think in the bigger picture we agree. Like their offensive line's in good shape. They invested a lot. Have invested a lot in their weapons over the past couple of years with Omar Cooper and Kenyon Sadiq. Like you said, Garrett Wilson I think is a solid number 1, and I think Aaron Glenn will get that defense better in year 2. I just think their schedule is not good. I mean, not ideal because they have the Titans week 1, Browns week 5, Dolphins off their bye week in week 7, off the Dolphins bye week in week 7, then the Raiders in week 8, and then they play the Dolphins in Miami week 12. Then it's their week 13 bye. Like over their first 12 games, they arguably have 8 games in which they'll be 7-point underdogs or greater, and like maybe they could snipe one of those games and go 5-7, which that would be relevant games into December. But I think there's a strong chance they're 4-8 heading into the bye week, and I don't know if that'll count as relevant games. But I think the ceiling for this team is higher because if Geno Smith can play like he did in Seattle, and their recent investments in the draft and the skill positions prove to be worthwhile investments, then I could see it. I just think the Jets. I just think their defense is still going to be bad. I don't believe in Geno Smith, so I'm not with you there, but I see the vision in terms of the ceiling of this roster could maybe be like a 7-10, 8-9 team that maybe loses 3 games down the stretch to get a better draft pick.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think they can be normal bad, which they have not been in a while. Like the Jets have been either like absolutely objectively atrocious like they were last year, or not completely horrible. But when they're not completely horrible, they do it in a really embarrassing fashion. Like in 2022 they were 7-4, and then they lost 6 in a row to end the year. 2023 they won 7 games without Aaron Rodgers that year. But their offense was so historically putrid that like it felt worse. And of course they won 5 games in 2024. So I'm thinking they can be like a normal bad team this year is the vision that I see for New York. All right. What's your number 3, Lucas?
My number 3 is we're going to go negative here, and I think the Carolina Panthers, which they will be one of my teams that misses the playoffs after making it. I think the Carolina Panthers will finish with the top 5 pick, and
Okay.
it's unfortunate, like because Bryce Young has, for some reason, a big supporting online, but I think a lot of it is I just I think there's always some team that makes the playoffs that's terrible the year after. It always happens. And I think for the Panthers, it kind of makes sense because I don't believe in Bryce Young. Dave Canales, I think he's a fine coach. I don't think he's like a great coach by any means. He's not awful. But you got to look, they're getting beat the hell up right now. Nick Scorton,
I
their
know. I'm
second round
forgot
pick
to
from
mention.
last
Yeah.
year. Yeah, his Nick Scorton, not Scourton, like our friend Matt Verder likes to say, it is Scorton. He tore his ACL. He's done for the year. But not only that, their offensive line is like in really not good shape. They lost Cade Mays to Detroit. Their guards, Robert Hunt, and I forgot the other one, Damian Lewis, I think. They're okay, but like their tackle situation is like really inconsistent because Taylor Moton, who was their star right tackle for almost a decade, he got a blood clot in June. He's probably going to miss regular season games. Ike Ekwonu, who was their left tackle they picked a couple years ago, he ruptured his patellar. That's the Josh Simmons injury. He did that against the Rams. He's on the pup. And Monroe Freeling, who I thought was a fine prospect, he's not a guarantee. He was kind of raw. He's not really a plug and play guy. They might move him to right tackle, even though he was a college left tackle. And Rasheed Walker, I thought was a fine pick for what they got, but it's not like the Packers were itching to bring him back. So there's a scenario in which this offensive line is in shambles. It's not good. Bryce Young behind a bad offensive line is a bad combination. And their defensive line is going through it too. Nick Scorton, he's out for the year. I know they paid Jalen. What's his name? Jalen. Why am I forgetting the last name? Jalen Phillips. They paid Jalen
Oh, yeah.
Phillips, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, we know
I thought you
Scorton's
were
out for
thinking
the
of
year.
Coker, Jalen Coker. I'm like,
No,
oh,
no,
yeah.
the pass rusher. But like we know Scorton's out for the year, and Chiefs legend Turk Wharton, he's on the pup as well. So I just think this might be a year from hell with injuries for the Panthers, and they end up getting a top 5 pick, and they haven't extended Bryce Young like they were correct not to do, and I think they finished top 5, and I think there's a chance Bryce Young, this is his last season in Carolina.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Not to spoil anything, I do not think the Panthers will make the playoffs this year. I don't know. I don't know if they're a bottom 5 team. I'm gonna list 5 teams off the bat I think are worse. I think the Browns are worse. I think the Raiders, Cardinals, Dolphins. Um, Gosh, actually, as a matter of fact, I don't know if there's a 5th team that's definitively worse
Yeah,
than them.
and I'm not saying they have like a bad roster or like the
Right,
coaching staff and front office is a disaster. I just think it's the injuries in the trenches, and their schedule isn't like that ideal either. Because remember, they won the division, so they have
right,
to play a first place schedule. So it's not like even though they were 8 and 9 last year, they had to host a playoff game, so they almost beat the Rams. But like their schedule this year is not fun. I mean, I'm just gonna go through their schedule. Like here's the games where I think like okay, they should win. You can make an argument they should win. They got the Falcons and the Browns weeks 2 and 3, then maybe the Bucks at home, and then like the Saints. I guess I think the Saints are going to be really good this year or like competitive, and like their schedule isn't like that favorable. It's not awful by any means. It's not like Broncos brutal, but I just think there's always a few teams every year in which everything goes wrong, and like kind of like the Chiefs last year, where like it's the NFL. There's 32 teams.
right.
5 teams are going to pick bottom 5. I don't think the bottom 5 teams every year are always the teams with the lowest Super Bowl odds. I think there's always at least one team that like sneaks into the bottom 5, which whether it be injuries or the quarterback shits the bed. But I just think the Panthers are that team where I just think this is going to be a year from hell. Finish 4-13 and get the 5th overall pick.
Right. And honestly, it might be best for them because Bryce Young is not good, in my opinion. And I think it'd be best for them to move on from him. I feel like if they have another year where they're not great, but they're not horrible, it might fool them to bring him back. I think they can do better at the quarterback position. So I tend to agree there. And like I said, their roster, I don't think is awful, but like it's not quite where it needs to be, in my opinion. So I'm saying in my opinion a lot, but I yeah, I tend to agree. Like I don't think the Panthers are going to be particularly good this season, and so it's not a great omen when a promising young defensive player on your team is tearing his ACL in the first day of camp. Like that's horrible. I feel awful for Nick Scorton. But Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna be a bottom five team, but like I definitely see the vision in that prediction of them kind of falling off the face of the earth this year. All right, my next prediction. This one might be a little out there, but I don't think it's completely unreasonable. And that involves the Minnesota Vikings, who we were discussing at the beginning of this podcast. Kyler Murray, in my prediction here, 2026 Kyler Murray will be 2024 Sam Darnold. I think Kyler Murray is going to have a really nice season. I think he is going to have a Pro Bowl season, not like a fake Pro Bowl season like Shador Sanders had last year, like a legitimate. He'll be one of the top three NFC quarterbacks in the first Pro Bowl selection, and I think he will take the Vikings to the playoffs this year. I don't think they're gonna like I'm not going to spoil whether I think they win the division or not because I'll save that for later. But slight spoiler, I do have the Vikings as of July 25th. I do have the Vikings as a playoff team this year, and I think Kyler Murray with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings, Kevin O'Connell, playing half of his games indoors. I think he's going to have a nice resurgent year, and he's going to play close, if not at the level that we saw in the first half of 2021. Um, and I think he's going to really kind of like put his career back on the positive upward trajectory. And I think he will be the long term quarterback in Minnesota after the season. I think, unlike Darnold, I think they will extend him after a Pro Bowl playoff season. So that's my prediction there. Kyler Murray, Pro Bowler, great season, not great, but like resurgent Pro Bowl caliber season and takes the Vikings to the playoffs. Because when you look at the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell, they make the playoffs every other year. 2022, they made it. 2023, they missed. 2024, of course, they went 14-3. And of course, last year, somehow had a winning record, but they missed the playoffs ultimately. I think they get back to the postseason this year because of Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I feel you. Like as a Minnesota guy, I'm certainly rooting for it. I just didn't have the Vikings in the playoffs this year just because like I texted you, I think the NFC is going to be very deep in terms of the quality of teams. I just think based on how it looked out, I'm looking at NFLPlayoffPredictors.com. If you're looking for a good site to kind of like predict every game and go through like a playoff machine like ESPN has, but it's more interactive, it's easier to go team by team instead of week by week. Just go to PlayoffPredictors.com, and then that's an excellent site. So sorry for the shameless plug there for a website I have no connection to. I have the Vikings as the 10 seed, finishing 10-7. So I think
Okay.
I think they're a team where, like I said about the Cowboys, like if they get the best case scenario, like everything goes right or most things go right, they could go 11-6, 12-5, win the NFC North, certainly make the playoffs. I think there might be a little bit of growing pains with Kyler Murray and Kevin O'Connell. I understand that it's like the math of like Kyler's better than JJ McCarthy, Max Brosmer, and Carson Wentz, but I think the scheme fits not. I don't love it. Kyler does not like to use the middle of the field. He's more of a deep ball thrower and an outside the numbers guy because he can't see over the middle of the field because he's 2 feet tall. And Kevin O'Connell really likes to use the middle of the field. Justin Jefferson, they move him across the field. They rotate Addison and Jefferson a lot. They brought in Hawkinson for a reason. I think they'll figure it out and he'll be good. I just think it won't be enough to make the playoffs, but I certainly can see this coming true, so I respect the opinion.
All righty. What's your number 4 prediction?
Number 4 for me is the most mild because this barely works as a bold opinion or a bold
Right.
prediction, but I have no repeat division winners in the NFC this year.
Interesting.
So if you remember last year, Seahawks won the West, Bears won the NFC North, Eagles won the NFC East, and then the Panthers, as the aforementioned Panthers, they won the NFC South. I think there's going to be 4 new division winners. Usually there's at least one team that repeats. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think the Rams will win the NFC West. I don't think that's a bold prediction. I already said Dallas will win the NFC East, and I alluded that I think New Orleans is going to be pretty good. I have the Saints winning the NFC South, or I could also see Tampa or Atlanta winning that. I just don't think it'll be Carolina. And then the NFC North, the NFC North, the hardest one to predict, kind of like what you said with the Vikings, but I have Green Bay winning the North this year, but like that's the one where I'm like the most nervous I could be wrong. But we'll see. I might talk about Chicago later in this segment, but this is pretty mild. I'm not going to go dive too deep, but I think every team that won an NFC division last year does not win the division this year. Not saying they're all going to miss the playoffs, but I think there's going to be 4 new division winners in the NFC.
Interesting. So, not to spoil anything, but this is a slight spoiler. I have 4 new division winners in the AFC. I'm not going to say which teams. It's not one of my bold predictions. I'll say which teams when we do our official predictions. But I don't have four new winners in the NFC. I have a couple repeat, not all, but a couple. I have four new in the AFC. Just a little throw it out there a little
Oh,
bit.
wait, I gotta call timeout here.
What?
Um, I actually I need to amend my bold prediction because I did not pick up on it till now, but I have 8 new division winners. So I also
Oh,
have
okay.
4 new division winners in the AFC. So I don't know why I just thought about NFC. I think what happened was I switched out the one of the AFC divisions. Like I changed a couple games that changed the division winner. So I had one of the teams winning, but after amending a few games, I had that team winning the division, now missing the playoffs. We'll talk about them later. But I amended. It's no longer all NFC division winners. It's all division winners last year missed or don't win the division this year, and there's 8 fresh new winners.
Well,
So
last
my
year, I
bad.
think no, you're good. Last year, I think the only repeat division winner a year ago was the Eagles in the NFC
Yeah,
East because it went Lions in 2024, then Bears, Bucks, and then Panthers, Rams, and then Seahawks, Bills, and then Patriots, Ravens, and then Steelers, Texans, and then Jaguars, and then the Chiefs, and then the Broncos. So the Eagles, 7 of the 8 divisions last year had new winners. So look, I have 6 new winners. I have 2 repeat winners, both of them in the NFC. But I have 4 new ones in the AFC. So look, I don't think that's a Super Bowl prediction after what we saw. Not that I'm crapping on it, but
yeah.
like I think that's a reasonable prediction after what we saw a year ago. All right, my last, and this is my hottest take. This is probably the most out there, probably the least likely in terms of it coming to fruition. My bold prediction is if the Bills, I'm not saying whether they will or won't, because no spoilers. If the Bills don't reach the Super Bowl this year, I think there will be rumblings about Josh Allen potentially leaving Buffalo sooner than we thought. I don't think it will be this next offseason. I think he will be there in 2027. But if it's another year where they lose in the divisional round or lose in the wild card, God forbid, or even worse, don't make the playoffs, I think there will be some talk about how many more years does he have left there before he goes to a new team and finds another opportunity? Because like I said, he's from, the Santa Clara area. Does he go to the 49ers, to a team like that if they want to, upgrade over? Obviously, he'd be an upgrade over Brock Purdy. Does he go to the Rams after Stafford retires? Does he find a better situation where he thinks it's more likely that he can win a Super Bowl if the Bills fall short of their goal again this year? Now, if they reach or win the Super Bowl, that's none of that comes to fruition. But if they fall short again, I think there will be some chatter within the national media about, could 2027 be his last year in Buffalo? I get that that's a very hot take, but that's mine.
I hear you all the way. I'm not gonna say I agree, but at the same time, like they lose the wild card round or the divisional round, like the chatter is going to happen. I don't think Allen is close to the point yet where he's going to want out, but I think if it happens again, I think the rumors are going to are going to start swirling. There's might be some smoke. Again, like obviously you're right. He's not going to get traded next year unless something dramatic happens. But
Right.
I just don't think it's going to happen, especially because they hired Joe Brady as head coach, and like that was Allen's guy. So like I don't think it's really makes sense for Allen to demand out, which I'm not saying he will. But like it is logically it doesn't make sense when he basically handpicked the new head coach and then he wants out immediately after. I think that would be a bad look. So I'm not going to say 100% agree, but the logic is very sound.
Yeah, no, I just, like I said, it's kind of, and the same goes for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore too. Like it kind of, when you connect the dots, it's like he's 30, he'll be 31 in 2027. Like the clock's ticking a little bit, and I think he'll get to the point. There will get to the point where people wonder, like, how much time does he have left there before he wants to find a better situation where he can win a championship. All right, Lucas, what is your final prediction, bold prediction for 2026?
This technically counts as a bold prediction, but I have a I don't even think it's a sleeper. I think this guy should be top 5. If this guy's not top 5 in odds, but I'm actually gonna look it up before I say anything. It's not good. Um, it's not good podcasting, but I'm just gonna look up who the top 5 favorites are. And I don't see this guy's name mentioned, so I'm going to say it. It is a bold prediction. I think Jadarian Price of the Seattle Seahawks wins Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Mm,
And I think this one, it technically counts as bold, but I don't think it is. Like, if you remember, I was a big fan of Jadarian Price. I don't think he was some perfect prospect that should have gone top 10 right after Jeremiah Love did, but he was teammates with Love in Notre Dame. He didn't get the snaps. He arguably should have transferred after 2024, go to a different situation where he could have thrived, and he could have been a top 10 pick as well. I think he
right.
has all the talent in the world to be a future top 5 to 7 running back in a couple years. I think he'll have the opportunity in Seattle, who I think is going to be good. So it's a lot of opportunities to run the ball. But also, like, logically, look at Seattle's depth chart around him. Like,
Right.
Zach Charbonnet tore his ACL against the Niners in the divisional round. Who knows when he's back? He's on the pup. Like, and other than that, it's Kenny McIntosh, who cares? And then, like, Emmanuel Wilson, who's, like, I guess a receiving back. But, like, I think that's just going to open up a lot of opportunities for him to get a lot of volume yards, maybe a lot of, like, short yardage touchdowns. And I think that'll skyrocket his odds. I don't know if Jeremiah Love's going to thrive in Arizona. Fernando Mendoza might not start. All the wide receivers have questions. So I think I'm going to take a shot with Jadarian Price. If you like to bet on Polymarket or call sheet, maybe take Jadarian Price or whatever percentage he's at. Maybe he has a hot start, you make some money. I don't believe in those sites, but I'm just trying to think about my thought process. So yeah, that's my last one. Jadarian Price goes from 32nd overall pick to Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and if he's Offensive Rookie of the Year, I mean, the Seahawks should be elated because their biggest loss this offseason was Kenneth Walker, obviously to the Chiefs. So if he comes in and plays at that level, I mean, they should be super excited. They could easily get back to the Super Bowl if Jadarian Price comes in as Offensive Rookie of the Year level. I don't know if I would predict that, because I just think there are some. I don't know who my Offensive Rookie of the Year prediction is going to be. I'll save that for August. I haven't really thought about it yet, but. Well, yeah, like that would be huge for Seattle if he comes in and is an Offensive Rookie of the Year. All right, that wraps up our 5 bold predictions for each of us for the 2026 NFL season. We have a few more predictions. We'll go through these a little quicker. We'll spend a little blurb explaining our decisions on each of them. I think Lucas and I have already spoiled one each, and that is 3 teams that made the playoffs last year per conference that we think will miss the playoffs in 2026. I'll do the AFC. Lucas did the NFC. I will start with a team that I already revealed just to get out of the way, the Denver Broncos. They were the 1 seed in the AFC last year. Like I said, they go to the AFC Championship game. I don't mean to repeat myself, probably go to the Super Bowl if Bo Nix doesn't shatter his ankle against the Bills. But I already explained my reasoning. I think their schedule is really difficult. I think they had a lot of close game luck last year. I can see a world where they're a better version of the 2025 Chiefs, where the close game regression really comes to fruition. And they don't have as much luck in those 1-score games as they did last year. And like I said, I'm not a huge Bo Nix guy. I don't think he's a guy who can really elevate or carry a team, in my opinion. The Jalen Waddle addition does make their offense more threatening, but I think there's a world where their defense takes a slight step back because they did lose some pieces. They lost John Franklin Myers. They lost, Jonathan Cooper. We don't know what's going on there on up front. They lost Drake Greenlaw back to San Francisco. So they do have some guys that were there last year that are no longer a part of that defensive unit this year. I think the Broncos, like I said, I don't think they're going to be a bad team, but I think they're like a 500-ish team in 2026.
No, I feel you all the way. And sorry, I was getting a text. Are you only doing the AFC and I do the NFC, or are we doing all 6, each of us?
I'll do AFC and I'll do 3
Okay.
AFC,
Okay.
you'll do 3 NFC. Yeah.
Got it. And so my 3 NFC teams that are not the 3, but the first one, I'm just going to say the Panthers. Like, we already talked about that, so I'm not going to spoil. They were last on my list, but I'm just going to say them first because I already talked about it. Injuries. I'm not a believer in Bryce Young. I don't think the roster was like so good that like it's definitely going to make the playoffs. But like the injuries in the trenches and Bryce Young are like really my what's giving me pause. And I think even if they're not a bottom 5 team, I think they're probably going to miss the playoffs.
All right. Interesting. I mean, I think that's the Panthers. I think of all 14 playoff teams last year, they're the most popular pick by everybody to miss it this year. So I think you got the easy one out of the way. My next one, and this one I think is pretty popular from consensus. Some people have them in, some people don't, and that's the Chargers. I do not. So I think both AFC West teams that were in the playoffs last year, I think missed this year. The Chargers were the 7th seed last year. They went 11-6. They scored just 3 points in New England in the wild card round. I just don't think they're that talented of a team. Like Justin Herbert is a good quarterback, but he is not a guy who performs well in the biggest of moments. Obviously, he's been horrible in the playoffs. Their receivers are not particularly good. Lad McConkey is good, but he's not elite. The rest of the receivers are a big question mark. Their interior of their offensive line is still a problem. Their defense, I think, will take a step back without Jesse Minter. And really, when you look at their defense, outside of Tui Pelotu and Derwin James, they really don't have any game changers on that side of the ball. Like I like Henley at linebacker. I like Cam Hart at corner, but they're not guys that offensive coordinators stay up thinking about. I just don't like the vision for this team. I think their schedule is also really, really tough. I mean, they have their stretch from weeks 3 to 10 on their schedule is Bills, Seahawks, Broncos, Chiefs, Rams, Texans, Ravens. Like, good luck, guys. I don't see that working out. So, yeah, I think the Chargers, after making it the playoffs the first 2 years of the Jim Harbaugh era, fall short this year.
I'm with you. Like, I agree. Like, the
Yeah.
Chargers were on my list, so I don't think the Chargers are going to be complete dog water, but I don't think the transition to Mike McDaniel is going to go as smoothly. And it's always something with the Chargers. And I agree. I don't love the receiver or defensive depth, so I think it's perfectly fair. I have them with a losing record this year at 8-9, but I don't think it's that bold at all to have them like as the first or second team out in the AFC. Okay. Next team in the NFC, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right.
I
Make
know
your
that's
case.
always bold because the Eagles are always there. I don't think they've done enough to fortify their defense. Where I think the defense is still going to be good. I don't know if it's going to be special. Like Jalen Carter, like I don't know what he's going to be. He's too hit and miss. Again, to clarify, the Eagles, along with my third team that I'll mention a little bit later, they're with the Vikings. They're all three of those teams, with the Eagles, Vikings, and this third mystery team, 10-7 non-playoff teams. So I don't think they're going to be bad. I just think part of it is the Cowboys, I think, are going to be really good. I think there are other teams I trust more to be really good. And I just think, I know it seems like every other year the Eagles are awesome. It's like even years the Eagles are like some unstoppable force.
Right.
I just don't know if it like comes to a head and Nick Sirianni kind of wears out his welcome. And this Sean Mannion, I guess, doesn't turn out to be the answer at OC. And like everything boils over. And it turns out A.J. Brown was not the sole guy responsible for their collapses a couple times the past few years. So I don't think the Eagles are bad, but I think they might lose just enough games to maybe be the 9 seed instead of like the 6 or the maybe barely winning the NFC East.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting prediction because I think they're one of the most interesting teams in the league because we don't really know what they're going to be at all. Because like AJ Brown's gone, like I don't know what that offense is going to be. Is that addition by subtraction? Because if he was causing so much drama, we'll see. Like I still like their defense, especially with Fangio there. Like I still think they'll be good on that side of the ball. But like, will they be what they were 2 years ago, where they were just absolutely dominant on that end? I don't know. Like I said, I don't think unless injuries happen, I don't think there's a world where they're bad, like straight up bad. I think they have too much talent to be bad, but definitely a team that's worth keeping an eye on throughout training camp to get a feel for what we think of them going into the year. All right, my final AFC team that I had missing the playoffs was a division winner from last year, a team that won 13 games last year. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have the Jaguars missing out on the playoffs. I don't really love this team. I don't really understand why some people see this team as a good, legitimate team going into 2026. I think last year felt a little fluky, if I'm being honest. They were 5-4 last year, and then they got really, really hot. They got really, really hot. But when you look at the teams that they beat in that stretch, like they played Chargers, okay, fine, playoff team. The Cardinals, the Titans, the Colts, the Jets, the Broncos, good win. The Colts again with Philip Rivers, and then the Titans again. Like they really didn't beat outside of the Broncos and you want to maybe argue the Chargers, they didn't really beat anybody good at all. And then, of course, they lost a close wild card game. Like, I like Trevor Lawrence. I think he's fine, but I don't know how good he is. I think he's closer to like the 15th or anywhere from like the 13th to 15th best quarterback in football than he is to the ninth or eighth best quarterback in football. Cohen, I think, did a good job last year, but I like to see it again. And I don't think enough people are talking about the fact they lost their two best players from a year ago. They lost Travis Etienne, who was arguably their best offensive player last year, and they lost Devin Lloyd, who was by far their best defensive player last year, into Carolina. Like, I can see them in Denver, the two teams that won a lot of games in the regular season a year ago, that I can see some regression happening. Like I said, I like the coach. The quarterback, I think, is definitely above average, but I don't love the roster. And I think this is a team that probably goes. I don't think they have a winning record. I have them as like 7 or 8 wins. That's my hottest take, is that Jacksonville finishes with a losing record this year.
We are on very similar wavelengths because the Jaguars were also on my list for the AFC, and I don't have them with a losing record. I have them at 9-8, but there was an original version where I did have them at like 8-9, 7-10. So we're on a pretty similar wavelength there. So I see it. Like I think Liam Cohen's a great coach. So I think if he turns out okay, he has staying power as a top 8 coach, then I think they will make the playoffs. But their defense was heavily reliant on turnovers for early in last year. I think once they faced a team that with a real quarterback in the playoffs, they kind of like disintegrated. So I think there's a reality in which they don't get back. Like I'm not saying they don't have staying power to be consistent, but I don't trust them to be back next year. So I won't be surprised either way. My next team this is by far the most bold. And it's not that I intended for this team to miss the playoffs before I made any predictions, but it's kind of how the crumble got cookied. And I have the Chicago Bears on my list. And I know that kind of seems like, whoa, like what are you doing? It's like I just don't know if I trust the defense. Like they didn't do really that much to fortify the defensive line. Like I didn't really love their draft. Sam Roush, I thought was a really good prospect. I just didn't think he should have been I don't think the Bears should have picked him. I thought he was a second round pick, but not by the Bears, who have Colston Loveton and Cole Kmet. I did like the Dylan Thieneman pick in the first rounds, but at the same time, there's always a team like everyone expects to be like great that just always falls flat. Last year was Washington. I think there could be this year's Washington with maybe a more stable long term. I'm not hating Ben Johnson or Caleb Williams, but I think they were that third team that is 10-7 and misses the playoffs. Like because remember they won a couple games last year because Caleb Williams pulled a rabbit out of his ass. And once that doesn't go as me this year, they certainly don't win the NFC North because there was that first Packers game, not the one in the playoffs, but the first one where they arguably should have lost that one. That would have ruined their division title hopes as well. And so I think maybe there's another game or two that the ball doesn't bounce their way. And I have them as the 8th seed in the NFC, finishing 10-7. So if the NFL added a 8th playoff team per conference, they would have been in for me. But I just think this is a year they barely missed the playoffs. I still believe in them long term, but I think for 2026, I think there are a couple teams that'll sneak in just by pure luck, and I think the Bears are the first team out.
All right. No, I thought about the Bears because I did the NFC, and I'll predict them in our official predictions. But like I can see the argument because, like I said, they were similar to the Broncos in the sense like they won a lot of games. You could argue they had no business winning last year, including that playoff game. I like them more than the Broncos because Williams is better than Nix. Like Johnson and Peyton are both the coaches. I think are both really good. But I think it kind of comes down to quarterback, where I have more faith in the Bears than the Broncos. But I can understand that line of thinking where they play in a really tough division. Their defense is not particularly good, and like I said, they also could be victims of close game regression, just like the Chiefs were last year. So Lucas's NFC playoff teams that made it last year that will not make it this year are the Carolina Panthers, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Chicago Bears. My teams in the AFC that will not return to the playoffs this year are the Denver Broncos, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Surprisingly, I did not have the Steelers on there. I thought between them and Broncos, but I went with the Broncos because I think that'd be a little more shocking if they missed it than Pittsburgh. It was between those two teams for the final spot. But yeah, Lucas, that pretty much wraps up our agenda for today. Next time we meet, it will be probably midweek. We'll discuss some training camp. Next time we meet, I think teams will be on the field for training camp, so that's always exciting. And we will think of any more storylines to drive home at that point. But do you have any parting thoughts before we go?
No, I do not. I thought it was a good episode. We're mostly aligned with the AFC teams. I also had the Jaguars and the Chargers on my AFC list, so we're pretty similar. So I would say we're on a similar wavelength. But no, I got nothing else.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. We will see you on middle of this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you.